Hi everybody, this is Paul with SecureStack, and I'm going to show you how to use our platform to secure your web apps and their SDLC. SecureStack is the only solution that lets you secure your web applications holistically, starting first with the source code, then the cloud stack, and finally to all the public assets that your application uses and depends on. The target audience for this today are software engineering teams that want to add security to their CI/CD processes. So we'll be concentrating on how our CI/CD automation works, and we won't really be focusing on the web UI. In fact, once you set up your SecureStack API keys, you don't ever need to use the web UI again if you don't want to. Bloodhound integrates directly into your existing CI/CD processes and makes sure that what you're building and deploying meets your company's requirements and is secure. Okay, let's get going. First, let's start by going to bloodhound.securestack.com. You'll need to create an account there. You do that by clicking the Sign Up option in the upper right-hand corner. You can log in with existing Bitbucket or GitHub accounts, or alternately, you can create a brand new Bloodhound user with username and password that you choose. Today, I'm going to be using my existing Bitbucket identity. Once I authenticate to Bitbucket, I'll be asked to give permissions to SecureStack to be able to analyze the source code repositories. Okay, great. I'm logged in successfully to the SecureStack web portal, and our account is automatically set up. If I wanted to, I could start using the web UI to scan and manage applications right now. But our focus today, again, is going to be on the new CI/CD integration. So let's open another browser to our Bitbucket account and browse to the source code repository that I want to protect today with SecureStack. To enable SecureStack and Bitbucket pipelines, you'll need to set 3 variables in Bitbucket so it knows how to talk to SecureStack. Select the repository that you want to enable SecureStack for. Then, click on the repository settings in the left drawer. Now scroll down and select Repository Variables. The first 2 variables should be created here in Bitbucket Repository Variables. The first is, in all uppercase, bh_API_key. And the second is bh_sub_ID. You can find the API key and the sub ID in the Bloodhound web UI if you browse to the profile section in our web portal. The API key can be created in the 4th tab under Keys. Once there, just click Generate API Key and then set that key. But remember to grab it here because you won't be able to see it again in the web UI, and if you lose it, you will have to create another one. Only one key is valid at a time. Okay, back in Bitbucket, let's create the bh_API_key. After that, we'll create the bh_sub_ID variable. The sub ID can be found in the Bloodhound web UI on the 1st tab in the profile section. You can see here that my sub ID is bound to my Bitbucket user. Make sure you grab the complete string including any brackets. Okay, the last variable we need to create is bh_severity. It exists to set the threshold that you want SecureStack to alert on. So, for example, if you set the severity to critical, you won't be alerted on any medium or high severity issues. In this case, because my severity is set to critical, I'll only be alerted for critical events, which will then alert me in Slack and then stop that build so that any vulnerability or threat inside of that doesn't get into your application. The severity can be added here in repository variables, but we also suggest that you actually add it in the Bitbucket Pipeline file, as this allows you to set different severity alerting behavior for your different environments like dev, staging, and prod. For example, in dev, you might be okay with passing a build that's found some medium alerts, but in prod, you wouldn't want to okay that build. Okay, let's browse back to the software repository that we are protecting with SecureStack. If you're already using the Bitbucket Pipelines feature, you'll have an existing Bitbucket pipeline file that builds and deploys your application. Let's go ahead and add 3 new stanzas to that pipeline file. The first stanza you'll need to add is for our credential scan. Typically, this will go at the top of the pipeline file because if you find any credentials in this commit, you'll want to stop the rest of the process, right? This stanza is super simple, and you only have to pass the Bloodhound CLI app the code function and the -s option. The code function tells Bloodhound CLI that this scan is going to work against the source code repository, and the -s says search for secrets, as you see here. The second stanza is for our SCA, or third-party software vulnerability scan. SCA stands for Software Composition Analysis. This scan will check the most recent commit for any threats from libraries and frameworks or other third-party software that you're using. This command is pretty similar to the first one, and all you have to change is to replace the -s option with -t, which says, what type of programming language is this? In this case right here, this is a JavaScript app, so I'll be giving it the type Node. If you want to scan a Python or a Golang app, you just change that to Python or Go, as is appropriate. Those are the three languages we support right now: JavaScript, Go, and Python. The third and last stanza we need to add is for our application vulnerability scan. This is what happens at the end. Unlike the first two stanzas, you want to make sure this goes at the end of the pipeline file, as this scan will run against the deployed public URL for that app. For this scan, you'll want to tell the Bloodhound CLI app to use the recon function, and then you'll need to tell it to do this in real time with the -- real-time option. And finally, you want to tell Bloodhound CLI which target URL to scan. So in this case, we're scanning app.niftybank.org. Once all three of these stanzas are added to your Bitbucket Pipeline file, go ahead and save those changes and push that to your repository. Okay, let's show you how this all works in the real world. I'm at the terminal right now, and I'm going to make a change to one of my files in my JavaScript app, and I'll then push that to the origin server, which will kick off my Bitbucket pipeline. Okay, once I've pushed that commit to my origin, I'll browse back to the Bitbucket web UI, where you can see that the pipeline has started and it's in progress. I'll speed this next part up because it usually takes a few minutes, and I know you don't have time for all that. Okay, awesome. The deployment is done and it's all green, which means it passed all of our tests. Let's take a look at what happened in each individual step. The first step is our credential scan. This looks for usernames, passwords, API keys, and other credentials. The scan didn't find any credentials, so it moved on to the next step, which was the SCA scan. This looked for third-party vulnerabilities in the code that was used to build this app. In this case, we had a severity set to critical, so even though the scan did find some vulnerabilities, none of them were critical, so this step succeeded and it moved into the last step, which is our vulnerability assessment step. This scan checks more than 200 data points in the application and will fail if it finds any critical severity issues. In this case, it found one medium and one high, so the step passed and the deployment succeeded. Okay, you've seen what happens when things go well, but what happens if one of your developers adds a credential to one of the config files for your app? To test this, I'm adding an API key to the Bitbucket Pipelines file. I'll then commit it and push it to origin so our pipeline is triggered. Sure enough, it found the API key in less than a second and will show you where that credential is so your team can go and remove it. Because Bloodhound failed this step, it will send a notification to Slack so the whole team will be aware. Thanks so much for learning about our awesome CI/CD automation today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at hello@securestack.com. Cheers!